This is introductory video number 3. In this video, I'm going to go into a little bit more structure. But the thing to know is that this video is not a substitute for actually reading the syllabus, right? You have to read the syllabus. But the class is going to introduce you to the fundamentals of American government and also California government and politics as well, although the emphasis is definitely going to be on American government. The goal of the class is to provide you with the tools you need to think critically about political institutions, political actors, processes, and the events that shape your lives. This is a class about your life and some of the forces that shape it. Now, you may not believe that, so part of my goal is to convince you of that, right? My hope is that by the end of the class, you'll see two things, right? You'll see that politics is important, and that two, your participation in the political process improves the functioning of our political system. It makes our democracy work better. And note here that I don't care whether you're a Democrat or Republican, an independent, whether you're conservative or liberal, I don't care. When people participate, and in particular, younger people participate, I believe it improves the functioning of our democracy and improves the functioning of our political system. So one of the things you'll see all through this course is me encouraging you, cajoling you, berating you, whatever, to participate. But it's more than just voting. It's being knowledgeable, paying attention, talking to people about politics, knowing what's going on. But that's the big picture. The class will become available on Canvas on the first day of the semester. It may become available sooner, but for sure on the first day of the semester, which is going to be a Monday, right? Your first task is going to be to watch the introductory videos. Well, if you're watching this and hearing me say these words, you're already doing that, okay? Then your second task, after you've watched the introductory videos, is going to be to read the syllabus. Like I said, watching these videos is not a replacement for reading the syllabus. Your third task is going to be to take the syllabus quiz. Now, everybody has to take the syllabus quiz, and you must get 100% on the quiz in order to stay in the class. Now, you can take the syllabus quiz up to 10 times, right? So don't panic. I've never had a student try and take it 10 times and not eventually pass. But students who fail to do so by the end of the first week, so I'm talking about Friday of the end of the first week, you'll automatically be dropped from the class. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wake up on Saturday morning at the end of the first week, and anybody who hasn't taken the syllabus quiz and hasn't got a perfect score will be automatically dropped. No questions asked, no exceptions, period. So just be aware of that. And if you're thinking like, that's kind of strict and uncool, that's true. You may feel that way, and I'm not saying you're wrong for feeling that way. I just want you to know how I set up my class. I will be communicating with you via email on a regular basis. I'll also be using the announcements function in Canvas. But as far as emails, my emails are automatically sent to the email account that was provided to you by College of the Canyons. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that you set up and check your My Canyons email accounts on a regular basis. You may miss something that's important for you to know. And if you say to me, well, Phil, I never saw that email, that's not my problem, right? I'm telling you now ahead of time, you need to check it periodically. Again, I'll also be using the announcements function on Canvas. The syllabus will provide a link to show students how to set up their My Canyons email account. If you don't know how to do it, just click on the link in the syllabus and you'll see that. If you haven't received an email from me by the second day of class, you should email me at phil.gusson@canyons.edu. It either means there's a problem with your email or I screwed up and I forgot to send an email. And so just be mindful of that. But the odds are not only will you get an email from me when the class starts, you'll probably get an email from me before the class begins. In terms of the grading policy, there are four components to your grade, and I'll go into more detail later on. First, there are going to be a total of 15 chapter quizzes. These are quizzes based on the textbook. Each of them is worth a total of 55 points each. You're going to take 15, but I'm only going to count the top 10 scores, right? So if you miss a quiz, no big deal, right? Because you'll get a 0 because you missed it, and it'll be dropped, right? If you miss more than 5, that's a problem, right? Because then it's going to start affecting your grade. So there's a total of 50 points possible from the quizzes that are based on the reading questions. There are going to be 2 exams. They're each worth 200 points each. I'll talk about that in more detail. There are going to be 15 discussion boards. Sorry, my math is wrong. There are 14 discussion boards worth a maximum of 3 points each, right? So the most that you can get on a discussion board is for all the discussion boards is 42 points. And then in terms of other participation, there are 8 possible points leading to a total of 500 points in the class. I use the same scale, the Commons grading scale. 90% is an A, 90% or better is an A, 80% or better is a B, and so on. But just so you know, I don't always go exactly by that break, because sometimes what happens is somebody might have, let's say, 450 points. And then somebody has 449.9 points. I mean, they basically got the same grade. Calling one of those an A and one of those a B, it seems really arbitrary. And so what I frequently do is I look for what I call natural breaks in the data. So I'll look for a gap between what are A students and B students. It will never go higher than the actual syllabus, but it may go lower. So in the past, I've had students who had 448 points who wound up being in the A category because there was somebody who had, let's say, 448 points, and the next person down had like 445 points. So there was like a big gap. And so I'll say, let me use that as the cutoff. So the key is, I don't go by that exactly. I'm a guy who does data, and so I look for the data to provide me some guidance. I mean, so sometimes it always feels arbitrary and unfair. I try to do the best job that I can. The main thing that you guys need to know is don't use Canvas to calculate your grade, right? Because I do the calculations myself, and I don't usually add in the additional 8 points of participation that you see listed there until the very end of the semester. And I'll talk more about how you can earn those 8 points. But as you can see, this is a very exam heavy class. So that's where you should focus your energy. As I said in the earlier video, when I designed this course, I wanted your experience to approximate what you would experience in a face-to-face class. And so to that end, I recorded all of my lecture video, all my lectures in 15-minute increments, just like what I'm doing right now, although this is going to be longer than 15 minutes, right? But that's the basic idea, right? And so you have to watch the lecture videos to do well in this class. You're going to be taking 2 exams, right? Exam 1, exam 2. There'll be, on each exam, there'll be 20 multiple choice questions based on the textbook, right? That's what I said, like 20% of your exam is based on the textbook, the other course you're taking, not my course, but the ones by the authors of your textbook. But there are going to be 30 multiple choice questions based on the lecture videos, and there are going to be 2 essays based on the lecture videos. And so the bottom line is that to do well in this class, you have to watch the lecture videos. And if your essays are based on information from the textbook or any other source, I'm going to assume you didn't watch, or maybe you didn't understand, but either you didn't watch or you didn't understand the lecture videos, and I'm going to grade you accordingly. So you could have completely accurate information in your essay, but if it didn't come from my lecture videos, you might as well not even bother writing it. Okay. So, and I know some students think like, that's not fair. Okay, that's fine. I mean, I understand people have different views, and if you don't think that's fair, you don't have to take my class. But if you're going to take my class, you're certainly going to abide by my rules, and those are the rules. Again, you might think, well, this guy's kind of a dick. I'm not taking his class. I get that. I get that. I don't know that I would take my class if I was a student. But what I will do is I'll be honest with you, and I'll tell you exactly what my expectations are ahead of time, and that's what I'm doing here. Now, the Canvas page is set up in modules for every topic that we discuss. You'll see section 1, the first section is on assessing democracy. In every one of the modules, you'll see a set of lecture notes. I provide a comprehensive set of lecture notes that correspond to the lecture videos, right? So you can literally follow along on the lecture notes as you watch the videos. The lecture notes include definitions of concepts presented in the lecture videos, and they also include blank spaces so you can take additional notes. Now, some students, because I upload the lecture notes as a Word document, some people type it into the Word document. Some people have asked that I do a PDF file, so they'll type it into the PDF file. And some students just like to take lecture notes by hand. Whatever you want to do is fine with me, but the lecture notes are there. Now, here's the thing about the lecture notes. When I'm grading your essays, I'm particularly interested in the extent to which you provided details beyond the definitions in the lecture notes, right? I'm looking to see who took really good notes, who took down what I said, who remembered what I said, who wrote out clearly what I said. My approach to teaching is basically to use the same approach over and over again. I define a concept, I elaborate on the concept, and then I provide an example that demonstrates how the concept works, right? Every once in a while, you'll see it's not define, elaborate, example. It's really define, example, elaborate. But the point is that when my approach is define, elaborate, example, your essay should follow the same approach. Define the concept, elaborate on the concept, and provide an example. But remember, the example isn't just saying, for example, this. The example is supposed to demonstrate your understanding of the concepts that I've discussed in the lecture videos. There's no word count for the essays. They should address each of the points in the rubric that you'll see on the study guide. So you'll see a bunch of questions on the study guide, and I give a breakdown of the rubric. You want to make sure that when you write your essays, you hit on each point in the rubric, plus the concepts I discussed in the lecture video. So if you just answer the questions in the rubric, that's good. You'll get a good grade. If you want a great grade, take good notes and make sure you include the main concepts that I discussed, even if they're not listed in the rubric. Okay? And that's really important. So let me say that again. Your essays, I would recommend you complete the study guide ahead of time, should address each of the points in the rubric, and take a look at the study guide and you'll see what I mean. Plus concepts that I discussed in the lecture videos that may not be in the rubric. This is kind of how I tell the difference between good students and great students. The great students take really good notes and make sure they present all of that information in their essays. But the thing is, writing more is not necessarily better. You don't want to include extraneous information in your essays. I always use the same example, and so I'm going to use it again. If you get an essay question that describes how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and in your essay you describe it perfectly, right? And then you continue on and describe how to make a grilled cheese sandwich that has nothing to do with the question that I asked you, that suggests a lack of understanding. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're looking at the question and you're saying what is relevant and what is not relevant. You don't want to include extraneous information. Do not work on the assumption that writing more is better. I've had it be in many cases that people write a lot, but some of it has nothing to do with the question itself. Don't make that mistake. Okay. Also, when you go to the Canvas page, you'll see this. If you scroll down in the first part of the class, we're going to be talking, the 6 sections are, we're going to be assessing democracy, the Constitution, federalism, public opinion, the news media, and elections. Those are the topics that we're going to hit. So what you're going to want to do, if you scroll down to Canvas, what you'll see below that is the study guide, right? The essay questions on the exam are going to be similar to, and in some cases identical to, the questions on the study guide. Not always, but sometimes. Each question on the study guide, as I said before, includes a rubric that provides a guide for what I'm looking for. But again, you want to go beyond just what's in the rubric. If you want a great grade, you're going to go beyond what's in the rubric, and you want to make sure that all the points that I touch on in the lecture video you have in your essay, as long as they're relevant. I recommend that what you do is write a full and complete answers immediately after you watch the lecture videos on a particular topic. So, for example, you'll see when you watch the first video that I talk about is I give my definition of politics, and I talk about it quite extensively. If I was taking the class, and you might do it differently, if I was taking the class, once I finished watching the whole section on my definition of politics, I would pause the video, and while the information was still fresh in my head and my notes are still fresh in my head, I would write out an essay. While everything is still, then I would check it against the rubric, check it against my notes, and I'd be like, man, that's a solid essay. The thing is that if you do that, you don't have to think about that question ever again. And if you're lucky enough that Canvas randomly selects that question, you know what you can do? You go over, it's the exact same question. You copy your answer from the study guide, you paste it into Canvas, and boom, you're done. Okay, so that's the way it works. But again, as I said before, and I'm going to repeat myself a few times just to make this point clear, be sure to use the lecture notes and the rubric to ensure that you've addressed all the main points in the question. If you take the time to complete the study guide before the exam, in some cases, you're just going to be able to copy and paste your essay from the study guide into the exam. In some cases, I've sort of combined 2 questions, and so make sure you read the question carefully. You may have to do a little editing, but you won't have to do a lot. My whole approach is not to try and trick you. I don't ever want students to be surprised about what they're being tested on. I'm going to tell you what I want you to study. I hope you're going to study it, and then I'm going to test you on what I said I was going to test you on. I hated taking classes where I would get a question and go, I didn't know this was going to be something the instructor was going to ask about. I guarantee you, if you're surprised by something that's on my exam, it's because you didn't do the study guide. That simple. The structure of the exams, which I mentioned briefly before, that I'm going to go into a little more detail. First, it's going to start up with multiple choice questions that are based on the textbook. There'll be 20 questions randomly selected from the reading questions, right? And so you'll have reading questions for every chapter. I've uploaded them all into Canvas, and Canvas will just randomly select 20. Usually it selects an equal number from each chapter. So 2 or 3 from each chapter. Your answers to these multiple choice questions should be based entirely on the textbook, not on my lectures, right? This is the part of the class that you're taking with the authors from your textbook. On the exam, these multiple choice questions will be identified by chapter. So they'll either chapter 1, 2, 3, and so on. Okay. In terms of the structure of the exam, the second part of the exam are going to be multiple choice questions again, but there'll be 30 multiple choice questions worth 2 points each. And these multiple choice questions will be randomly selected from the practice quizzes that I mentioned before. That I provided at the beginning of the class. Remember, the practice quizzes are not graded. You can take them up to 2 times, but the questions on this part, these multiple choice questions will be taken from the practice quizzes. Again, I've uploaded them, and Canvas will randomly choose 30 questions from the ones that I've uploaded. Your answers to these multiple choice questions should be based entirely on the lecture videos, not on the textbook, because what you're going to see is that there are times where the authors of the textbook and I disagree. Now, obviously, I'm right and they're wrong, right? But that's not the point here. We don't always agree, and you want to make sure that you answer the reading questions with their information and my multiple choice questions with my information. On the exam, the multiple choice questions will be identified by an abbreviation and then a topic number. You don't need to memorize this, but like the Constitution lecture, if you got the 26th question on the Constitution, you might see Const 026. If it was assessing democracy, the first video, you'll see AD for assessing democracy 14, and so on. You don't really need to memorize that, but I just want you to know that the multiple choice questions based on the textbook will identify the chapter. These will have other kinds of denotations, but in theory, you should be able to tell by the nature of the questions. Like a lot of the questions from the exam say in Phil's lecture, or Phil argued, or Phil said, you'll know it's from the lectures. And then the last part is part 3, which are the essay questions. There's going to be a 70-point essay question and a 30-point essay question. And the number here is actually wrong. That should be 100 points. So the essay questions will be worth a total of 100 points. One 70-point essay and one 30-point essay. There's, again, no word count requirement. The key is to answer them completely. So that's the key. Don't write in bullet points. Don't write in outline form. You're writing an essay. The only thing is do not include the text from the study guide. So the study guide will have it'll be the question, and then it'll say your answer should include this, 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 and this, and it'll list maybe 6 or 7 or 8 things. Don't put that in your essay, the part from the study guide. You're supposed to write an essay, right? And that's the way it should be. It should look like, not individual answers to questions. But you don't need an introductory paragraph, and you don't need a conclusion. Just jump right into the question. Now, I know a lot of students sometimes sort of feel like, because of the way they've been trained to write, they have to write an introductory paragraph in order to get to the body of the paragraph. That's fine. Write that. Just before you send it to me, delete it. I don't want to read it. And you don't have to summarize what you've said. I just read what you said. I know what you said. So just jump right into the question. Again, your answers should begin, in theory, with a definition of the concept, followed by a more elaborate, a detailed elaboration, and whenever appropriate, an example that demonstrates your understanding of the concept. In a couple of instances, as I said before, you'll define the concept, provide an example, and then do the elaboration, but you'll know which is which. Now, I'm going to have to get serious here for a sec. Despite my warnings, some students invariably decide to use internet sources or AI programs or the textbook to answer their essay questions. Here's the thing. Each semester, I wind up failing a handful of students who hope I'm not going to notice, especially the ones who use AI, right? I guess they think I'm stupid. They don't take me seriously. Maybe other professors have given them the same warning and they do it anyways and they haven't been caught. So just so you guys know, I teach other professors about AI. I am very familiar with AI. I use it a lot. I'm not an anti-AI person at all. If I was teaching other classes, I would require students to use AI as part of their study. Don't do it on my exams. It's when students use things like ChatGPT, it is obvious. You don't want to do it. Other students work on the assumption that if they make any effort to answer the essay questions, they're going to get enough points to pass the class. like everybody gets a trophy. That is not the case in my class. If you do crappy work, you're going to get a crappy grade, right? And so just understand, as I told you before, the good news, you have a professor who respects you. The bad news, you have a professor who respects you. This is a college level course. I'm looking for college level work. So don't think that you can just write a couple sentences and that means you're going to pass my class. That is not the way it works. While that may be true at in other classes at COC, that may be true if you're a high school student in your high school. It is definitely not true in my class. Okay, so I just want you to be aware of that ahead of time. Students who use that approach will usually wind up with a D or a fail in my class, and they wind up taking me a second time, and then they know I'm serious. I would prefer that you learn the easy way rather than the hard way. Don't use outside sources, and don't do crappy work, right? And so that's all I can do. All I can do is warn you about that. And then hopefully you'll listen. For students who plagiarize material, they will not only fail the class, I will report them to the dean of students for disciplinary action. Okay, I have a very low tolerance for cheating, a very low tolerance. And I'm pretty good at, not perfect, but I'm pretty good at detecting it. I don't like doing that. I don't want to be a babysitter. That's not, the reason I wanted to teach college is because I wanted to teach adults, right? I wanted to teach people who were responsible. Now, I know that there are some high school students in the class, and I will treat you like an adult. My expectation is you're going to behave like an adult, okay? And that is that you don't plagiarize material, you don't cheat, don't do it. I will be your best friend. I will be there to support you. I will give you whatever help I can. I'll meet you in office hours. I'll do whatever I can to help you succeed in the class. But if you break these fundamental rules of academia, I will be your worst nightmare. I don't like it, but I do it. And by the way, I don't do it just because for me, but I do it on behalf of the other students who took the time to study and do all the hard work. I do it out of respect for them. And if you're one of those students, I do it out of respect for you as well. Now, the reading questions and the quizzes. I've sort of talked about this again, but I want to go over it because, taking in this information, it's kind of hard to do taking it in all at one time. As I said before, for each chapter that you're going to read, I provide 25 what I call reading questions. I wish I could have come up with a more clever name, but that's what I got stuck with. The answers to the reading questions are based solely on the information in the textbook, not my lecture videos. For the quizzes, Canvas will randomly select 10 of the 25 reading questions each time you take the quiz. And as I said before, what you should do is read the chapter, go through the reading questions, answer them. They're more or less in order. As you read it, you should be able to answer them. Once you're confident in your answers, go ahead and take the quiz. But as I said before, I didn't say how much time you have. You have 20 minutes to complete each quiz, and you're allowed to take each quiz twice, and Canvas will only record your highest score. Okay, so it can't hurt you to take it twice. It can only help you. In terms of participation, if you recall at the beginning, I said that there are 8 additional participation points. There's a number of ways to earn those points, those 8 additional participation points. The main way to participate is by posting on the lecture video discussion board. So for each issue I discuss, there's a discussion board. That's where your main participation comes in doing that, right? But there are other ways to do it as well. I have an administrative questions discussion board that you can see if you click on discussions in Canvas. If you have any questions about the structure or organization of the class, post it there. That counts as participation. There's a reading questions discussion board. If there's an answer that you're not sure of, maybe you got an older edition and it's not in your textbook, you can pose the question on the reading questions discussion board, but be sure you read the instructions. There's also a current events discussion board. If there's a lot of stuff going on politically and you have questions about it, ask. I'll do my best to answer the questions in a way that hopefully will help you understand what's going on. You can also earn participation points by coming to office hours. So if you meet with me virtually during the regularly scheduled office hours, or if my office hours don't match your office hours, or your hours, like because you work or you take other classes, we can always arrange time to meet at a time that's convenient for you. My schedule is pretty flexible. And then you can also earn those additional participation points emailing me directly. But like if you email me directly about a question about the structure of the class, what I might do is answer your email, but ask you to post it on the administrative questions discussion board. So that's the way that you can earn points, the additional 8 points. Note, I do not offer extra credit. This is a college course. I know other professors do it. At UCLA, I didn't do it. At Pepperdine, I didn't do it. And I'm not doing it at College of the Canyons. Okay. So just be aware of that. If you want to send me an email, you're just going to get the same answer. On the lecture discussion boards, you should post your for every lecture, every topic, like the first one is assessing democracy, your posts should include 4 components. So you want to watch all the lecture videos first and then do your discussion board posts. Please number each of the components, and I'll explain them in a second, but leave a space between each one. It's really hard to read a block of letters. And read the instructions on the discussion board before posting. You're going to use the discussion board ideally to prepare for the exam. So let me explain what you're going to include. And again, you should always use the define, elaborate example approach, even on the discussion boards, because that'll help you prepare for the study guide. You can share your personal views on topics that I discussed in the lecture videos. I don't care about your personal views on the exam. I just want to know if you understood what I talked about. So these are the 4 components. You're going to write something new or interesting that you learned. You're going to write something that you previously believed that was confirmed. Now, on this one, try and be a little creative. Don't write something like, I previously believed that George Washington was the first president of the United States, and Phil's lecture confirmed that. So be a little more thoughtful if you want to get a lot of points on the discussion board. And then one thing that you previously believed that you either no longer believe or you've come to doubt, right? That's the 3rd component. And all I'm trying to do in the discussion boards here is connect what you have stored in memory already with what you're learning on my essays. And each one of these things does that. You know, the one new or interesting thing you've learned is comparing what you have stored and saying, oh, this wasn't stored before. One thing you previously believed that was confirmed is like this was something that was stored and the lecture confirmed that. One thing you previously believed that you no longer believe or have come to doubt, that's again getting you to think about what you know. The reason I do this is because research on education says that the best way for people to learn is to connect what they're learning to what they already know. The 4th component is if you have any questions about the material in the lecture that you didn't understand or would like to have clarified, and if you have questions that are sort of tangential to it, maybe I didn't discuss it, but you think these are kind of connected, you can ask that as well. You have a little bit of latitude on the discussion boards. And that's it. That is the entirety of the class. And so remember, this isn't a substitute for watching the lecture video, reading the syllabus, but watch the remaining 3 lecture videos and then be sure to take the syllabus quiz by the end of the week. And I hope this was not horribly boring.